Hello, 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 and welcome to this week's Marketing, Branding and Getting the Sales Show. And today we are talking about sales communication techniques. So if you want to improve your conversions, the results you get in your sales, then stay tuned. Let us know if you're watching live or on the replay in the chat. Just comment hashtag live or hashtag replay. And of course, feel free to share any questions or comments that you have on this topic as well. Before we dive into the content, let's do some quick introductions. So, Stephen, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Stephen Lerman from Chameleon BDS, Outsourced Business Development Service. So if you're looking to get more sales but don't have the resource, don't want to pick up the phone or are afraid of rejection, then you can give me a call and we can have a chat about how I can help you get in front of those clients by doing all the calling for you.
Fabulous. And welcome, Jeff, who is watching live. Good morning to you. Jess, over to you to introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. What would happen to your business if you lost your loyal customers and partners? A lot of businesses are relying on word of mouth and referrals for the survival of the business. But without loyalty, your business is struggling to grow or it will ultimately fail. So that's what I do. I help businesses maintain and attract even more loyal customers to get them noticed above competition, bringing in more revenue. Because in fact, a 5% increase in retention will increase profits more than 25%. So I have a 6-step brand loyalty process that I go through with my clients to achieve this. So if you're interested to know what that is, drop me a message and I'll send you a quick video.
Lovely. Thank you, Jess. And in case you haven't come across me before, my name is Una Doyle. My business is Creative Flow and I'm a business strategist and coach. And I help established business owners to build a business that they could sell tomorrow, but probably don't want to because it is, number one, highly profitable. Number two, fun to run because they and their team members are in creative flow. And number three, get to make a bigger impact in the world. And I can help them to identify how they can double their profits in only 47 minutes. If you want to know how to do that, comment below, send me a DM, and I'll send you a video showing you how. All right, so let's dive into today's topic. Stephen, over to you. What's the first thing that you want to share with us about sales communication techniques?
Okay, so the first thing I want to ask is, what's the importance of communication in sales? Okay, so the answer is the root of sales success is the ability to gather and provide information in a way that makes your prospect want to do business with you. I mean, there's a lot of competition out there, so why would they want to do business with you? So whether it's your value proposition, your pricing, even your product's features, none of that really does matter unless you're able to get your prospects to talk to you and listen to what you have to say, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so that means you've got to be really attuned to the person on the other end of the phone or, face to face, understand what they mean when they tell you or what they don't tell you something. Okay, it means that you really just can't list off a list of all the attributes or benefits or reasons why you should work together. So you've got to understand how the person on the other end of the phone, how they learn, what they care about, what communication style they prefer, and adapt your individual strategy accordingly. So what I've got a list. I mean, there's quite a lot of communications techniques out there, but what I've got a list of about 6 that we can go through, which I think are quite important on the most important techniques, if you will. So if you're ready, I'll get started.
Great.
Okay, number one, and I think this works for anything really, is paying full attention. Okay, and sales is pressure filled, isn't it? We, especially for people in sales, they put an enormous amount of pressure on themselves to sell, because sales is, you're only as good as your last sale. Okay, and I know myself, if I don't get a sale, I start to put pressure on myself because I want to do better. So if you're having a meeting with a client, your mind could wander onto other things. Whether you've got a contract that you're preparing, whether you've got tomorrow's meetings, or you've forgotten to do something. But you've got to be in the moment when you're in front of a client or on the other end of the telephone. You can't just show up. You've got to be there. Okay, so you have to give 100% of your attention to each call. Otherwise, you'll miss details. And if you miss things, then the person on the phone is going to have to repeat themselves, what they've already told you, and it'll be obvious when you're not paying attention. And that's really no way to treat a prospect, is it?
Absolutely not. It's that thing about really being present, isn't it? That yeah, our focus has to be there for sure.
Yeah,
I think
sorry, Jess.
No, I was just going to say how, obviously everything kind of moved online, didn't it? Obviously a few years ago for obvious reasons. And all of a sudden Zoom calls are a lot more, a lot more apparent. But I don't know about you guys, but when you were on kind of Zoom calls or even meetings or, a kind of big group of a meeting and everyone's on Zoom, you can see some people not paying attention because it's so easy for us to be distracted now, isn't it, in them situations? We've got so much just jumping up in front of us, like even notifications. We turn all our notifications off for this, don't we? So then we don't have a ping ping. But it's so easy for your email to jump up and go, oh, Bob's just emailed me, actually I need to jump into that, and you come away from what you're doing. So it is so easy to do, but putting things in place that keeps you present, I think that's a really good one. Yeah
Yeah,
Do you know what? Can I just add to that as well? It's like people might have seen me looking slightly distracted, but actually I was getting the LinkedIn page up so I could type what Stephen's saying in the comments, and bring it up on the video. But in the same way, I think what we ought to do as well is just maybe say to people, by the way, I'm going to be making some notes. So they know you're not doing an email or something like that if you're in that kind of situation. So like when I'm on an online networking event, I often will be typing down, or what is it people are asking for? Like, who are people wanting to be introduced to? I'm typing that down, or some details about them, or a kind of, contact this person to arrange a one-to-one. We could collaborate, whatever it might be. So I think it's also just sometimes you might be paying attention, but might not look like you're paying attention.
No, absolutely. And it's funny because when I'm on calls with people, and I've started saying to people, do you mind if I record the conversation? Because I can't multitask. And I found out recently that multitasking isn't actually normal.
No.
The beauty of technology is, or the advancements of technology, as I think you pointed this out to me, is Otter. Is it Otter? That's right.
Yes.
Where you
Yeah,
can
I love
record,
WhatsApp.
the conversation and then transcribe it. It does it for you. I mean, there
Mm.
are certain nuances where it doesn't quite pick up the words correctly, especially if there's a strong accent. But that makes things a lot easier, and then you can give somebody your undivided attention, because there's nothing worse than you're talking to somebody and then you say, sorry, what did you say? Or you have to make them repeat something because you've switched off momentarily. It's that switching off that's really frustrating. And listen, I've been guilty of doing it myself. So it is super important to pay as much attention as possible. And that way, ultimately, you want to make the other person on the other end of that phone feel loved and special and the only one in the world. So
Yeah.
pay full attention. But following on from that is, not only do you have to pay full attention, you've got to practice active listening. So it's not just about hearing somebody; it's about really listening, and then otherwise the conversation's not going to go anywhere, will it? Okay, and I know I've been guilty of this. Is not really thinking. Oh, sorry, thinking about what to say next instead of listening to what the person on the other phone is saying. Right.
yeah
So
For sure.
so active listening, can you just describe a little bit more what active listening means, maybe for people that don't kind
okay,
of
yeah.
understand it?
So active listening. So listening to the person, truly listening, and then feeding back the content and the feeling of the person's words that you're talking to. Okay, and then confirming that you've heard them correctly, and you can do that by asking a relevant follow-up question just to clarify your understanding of their situation, because there's nothing worse than them thinking that you understood and then you haven't got it. So it's always good to check back during that conversation just to make sure that you've understood what they're saying, rather than waiting for them to go through the whole conversation and then you've not got it.
And this obviously is a big part of the training that I did initially as a coach, is this active listening, and you're also listening to what isn't being said. So there often is a lot of things implied when we're communicating. So when you kind of, as Stephen was saying, repeat back, oh, so what I'm hearing is, and, kind of succinctly paraphrase what they might have taken, 3 minutes, 4 minutes to say, and you kind of paraphrase that in a couple of sentences. All right, so what I'm hearing is this. Is that right? So you're checking in for, have I got that right? And you know what's amazing? Like, seriously, this is so, so important, is the number of times when I have done that with a client and they're almost shocked when they hear their words spoken back to them. It's like it's new. It's really bizarre, but it happens all the time. And so people say things, but they haven't necessarily said it consciously, or they haven't thought about the impact of those words. So if you want to have powerful sales conversations, then, if you do that, that number one, make sure you have got the right end of the stick. And number two, especially when you're getting into, well, why is it so important for them to solve this problem? What impact is it actually happening, that it can actually make them go, wow, actually, I really need to do something about this? Because a lot of the time, people don't buy not because what you have isn't of interest or isn't of value. It's because it's not a priority. And so, though having a powerful sales conversation will, uncover, well, how much of a priority is this really? And is the other person actually aware of the impact that this problem is having on their business, on their life, etc.? I don't know, what do you think, Stephen?
I think you're absolutely right. It's people sometimes don't tell you the whole truth, and it's just as important to listen out for what they're not saying, as important as it is to hear what they are saying. So, you know, if you talk to somebody under the telephone, they might just be going through the motions because the boss has told them to get 3 different quotes, or speak to 3 different companies. So it's you have to listen to what they're saying, and hear the emotion in their voice, which is my next point, but I'll come back to that in a bit more detail. So it's just as important to hear what they're not telling you.
Mm, yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Um, okay. So technique number 3. This one is important to me because I do all my communicating via the telephone, so I cannot read body language over the telephone. So you have to master the nuance of tone of voice. Okay,
Mm.
so it's about voice pitch, the speed at which people are talking, the volume, and even choice of words, and these all affect what you're actually saying and how it's interpreted. So if you're in inside sales or doing something like what I do, then you have to make an impression with your voice. And that's why I tell people always smile when you're talking, because it affects your tone of voice and you can hear it. Okay, because people can't see you, they can only listen to how you're talking. And then you should always mirror how the person on the other end of the phone is talking to you. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to just explain what you mean by mirror for anyone who hasn't come across that term before?
Okay, so you're mirroring. So you want to mirror the speaking pattern. So you want to use the same type of language that they use, whether they're talking slang or industry lingo. Speak slowly if they're speaking slowly. Um, Basically, copying. Is another word. It's copy how they're talking. If they're speaking fast, you can maybe talk a little bit faster, and if they're talking slow, speak slow. You want to match the way they're talking as much as possible. It could be the formality of the way they're talking and the familiarity as well.
Yeah,
What you want to
just the reason why I started laughing to myself is I just thought of an example when I was on the other end of somebody not mirroring. Now, as you know, I'm fast thinking, fast speaking, and we had some estate agents come round to value our house a couple of years ago, and So there's one guy who came. I'm sure he was brilliant at his job, but the moment he was out the door, I turned to Steve and I said, "He's probably great, but I could not possibly deal with him. He drove me mad because he spoke so slowly, and it felt painful to me." So he was not mirroring. It was quite an extreme example, and because I do the personality profiling, I said to Steve, he probably is, in some ways, like very good in terms of paying attention to detail, making sure all the boxes are checked off and that. But I was just like, no, the thought of dealing with this person just was like, oh no, I couldn't do that.
No, it's so important. And you only get that over time. And it takes time to, to be able to mirror somebody. I mean, people have been in sales for years, and they all have their own communication styles, and the techniques. But I think mirroring is great because ultimately, what you're trying to do is you want to meet the person on the other end of the phone on their turf. Okay,
Yes.
and that means speaking in a way that they're comfortable with. Because if you put them at ease, then I feel they're more likely going to want to talk to you. So if you come across all harried and and exasperated, they're gonna like, I don't want to talk to this person. Like you said, this guy spoke slowly. Might have been great at his job, but you weren't. Did it make you feel uncomfortable?
It was literally painful to me
Right.
because I was kind of in my head. I was going, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, come on, hurry up, get to the
Yeah.
point. It just was like I've never experienced that before. It was quite extreme.
I
But
can
yeah,
imagine I can imagine how that would feel. You speak, him talking so slowly choosing his words carefully, being methodical. I mean, there's a time and a place for everything, but
mm,
you know, you know, here's a great book. Shameless plug, talking about mirroring, which is super important in sales. It's called Never Split the Difference by a gentleman called Chris Voss, Voss, and he is a former FBI negotiator that took what he'd learnt in that arena and applied it to business. Okay, so Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. I've listened to it as an Audible book about 4 times, and every time I listen to it, I pick up something new. It's brilliant, and I recommend it to everybody.
did you say Voss,
Yeah,
VOSS?
Voss.
Okay, I'm just
Yes,
popping that
and
into the
I can take
yes.
no credit for it. It was Alicia Barlow that told me about it, and then I tell everybody because it's a brilliant book, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Oh, one better. I put a thing in. Jess has actually popped the Amazon link in. Great. We've got a question actually here. And by the way, hello also to Chris and Helen who are also watching live. So Razam, while speaking to the prospect, is the salesperson's voice important?
Yes, absolutely. You don't. It's all tone of voice. Okay, and I think I said this a little bit earlier. Smile when you're talking because it evokes a different emotion. Listen, at the end of the day, we're on a phone call. We want to sell. Okay, we do want to sell. That's why we're there. But you can't come across as hurried or harried or exasperated or it's you've got to you've got to be calm. Okay, so it's really important that you're calm when you're talking to people because it puts people at ease. Okay, because then at the end of the day, if you're just talking to somebody for the first time, you want to build a rapport, and you can't build a rapport if you're all over the place. You've got to be calm.
Is that interesting thing when you do build rapport with somebody that you get to be in sync, and that that connection then really kickstarts the relationship building process and opens people up. It'll help take down those barriers, won't it? So yeah, absolutely. So yeah, your voice is important. I mean, I would also say, like, I think you have an advantage, and this is something we can all work on. But you've got a really nice voice, Stephen. You've got a lovely tone to it. It's nice to listen to. And so I think from that point of view, that probably helps as well, actually. But it is something, if somebody feels, oh, I'm not sure if my voice is that great, there's great programs out there that you can, just go watch YouTube videos. I'm sure you can find things, podcasts, etc. There's voice exercises. We're going back to my acting days. There's voice exercises you can do to actually give your voice more resonance. And then I think also what you're saying about thinking about, mastering the how to kind of connect and build rapport through that mirroring, but also then, like, if the person you're speaking to on the other end of the phone is rushed and harried, you want to be calm but not so slow that you get the feeling I had with that guy. But there is a way when you get that in sync, you can actually bring them down to your level of calm as well, can't you? And it's
Yeah,
probably something you do very naturally now because you've been doing it so long. And it will feel a bit strange for people when they first start doing it.
absolutely. And it's funny you mention that, and thank you for that compliment, by the way. And it's funny because in this book, this Never Split the Difference, Chris talks about speaking in the late night DJ's voice.
Yeah.
Okay, so and I must tell you, I had a discovery call with a potential client, and I spoke like that the whole time, just very low, you know. And I wasn't trying to be sexy or anything like that. It was just I thought I'm going to try this and see if it works. And at the end of the call, they said to me, have you ever done any voiceover work? We'd like you to do our out of hours voicemail system. I was like, wow, that's really cool. Because when I listen to myself, I cringe, and I know everybody does. I don't think I sound anything special, but a few people have said to me, you've got a really soothing tone of voice, um, and it comes naturally now. I've had to work at it because
Right.
obviously if I'm passionate about something, I get really excited and I talk faster and I'm quite emotive with my hands. And I'm not Italian, but Italians are very good at, and I can't do that when you're on the telephone. So it's all about tone of voice. You've got to be soothing. And if you emote that, you come across as commanding and knowing what you're talking about. So it's all tied in. It all helps. Smiling, being calm, being authoritative, but not being overbearing.
Yeah.
It's just making it natural. Like
Right.
like you're having a conversation.
Great. Let's do the other points. Razan, we'll come back to your question. I've seen it there, but we'll come back to. I want to make sure we get these points.
Okay.
Oh no, number 4.
Yes. Number 4. Be honest. Okay. Always be upfront about the questions that you can answer, the questions that you can't answer, and also, most importantly, about the questions with answers that the person on the other end of the telephone might not like. So people only buy from people that they trust. Okay. So how are they going to buy from you if and how they're going to tell you everything about their goals, their aspirations, areas for improvement, what they're looking for, if they don't trust you? So if you don't know the answer to something, say, I don't know the answer to that, but can I come back to you? And what that does, it gives you the opportunity to speak to them again. And the next time you talk to them, the conversation will have a slightly different tone because they've already spoken to you. You have that connection. You're building that rapport. Okay. So be honest.
Makes sense.
I do it all the time. You know, people, say to me, how's that? And, for me, in what I do, for me to understand everything about each and every single client, my head would explode with all the information. So I have a certain amount of knowledge, enough to have a meaningful conversation. Then I hand it over.
Mm,
But if people ask me a question and it's imperative or it's important enough for me to get that to the next level, then I will come back to them and say, listen, I don't know, but I can come back to you. And what that's happened and what's on the back of that, I've then managed to get an appointment because I've come back to them and said, right, okay. So that being said, yes, we'd like to proceed.
yeah.
Okay, so it does help. Just be honest. Why lie when the truth will do?
Well,
Okay,
it's so interesting. I've come across this before with clients where they're worried about not being able to answer something in a discovery call or in reaching out to somebody, and I'm always like, why? Like, have you swallowed Encyclopedia Britannica? Like, like how would you possibly know the answer to everything? Would you expect that of other people? And they usually go, well, no. Would you think that person was silly or stupid or unprofessional if they didn't know the answer to something and they said, oh, let me find that out for you? And they go, well, no. So I think quite often that's a mindset thing of people being worried about rejection.
Yeah, but just you're absolutely right. But just there's no harm in being honest, and people will respect you even more for it.
But
Say
better than trying to blag something that isn't true.
exactly, because it doesn't instill any confidence, because you'll get found out, you'll look silly, and might even come back to you and say, listen, you told me a lie. That's not the answer. They will respect you more if you say upfront, I don't know, I'm really sorry, I'll come back to you. And again, like I said, it provokes another conversation, doesn't it?
Yeah,
And it's all about the touch points at the end of the day.
absolutely. Yes, exactly. We like those touch points. That
Which
sounds
brings me
really
on to my next point, funnily enough. Be persistent, but don't pester. Okay. So, and I mentioned this in a LinkedIn live, not a LinkedIn live, a video that I did last week. The number of sales that occur off the first call is only 2%. So it's all people buy from between the 5th and the 12th point of contact. Okay. So when you call somebody and they don't answer, and then you email them, but they don't come back to you, it's not going to be it's counterproductive to keep doing the same thing over and over, leaving the same type of voicemail, sending the same email. So you're only going to alienate them and annoy them, and they're never going to come back to you. So if you've not had a response, whether it's via phone call or an email, try something a bit different. Okay, send a different type of email, with a different type of subject line, because you've only got, I think it's between 5 and 7 seconds for somebody to look at your email and say, oh, am I gonna read that or not?
yeah,
So
if that. Oh, it's a
yeah,
funny
exactly. Yeah,
5.
so yeah, exactly. So you've got to make it. There's got to be a reason why they want to open that email. Let's say if they've not engaged with any of your past email, the content might be the same, but the wording in the subject line might be slightly different,
Yeah.
enough to pique their interest. And then once you've managed to re-engage with them, you can steer the conversation back to business. Okay, so you want to get to the point where you're re-engaging with them, but you've not got a cease and desist order. Because you know, it's not over until you've had an injunction, and I've never had one of those. Um,
Yeah. Well, my motto is, keep going until they say yes or no.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
even if they say no, it might be a no,
no
not
for now.
now,
Yeah,
not a not ever. So
Like that.
absolutely.
You can even automate some of this stuff as well, can't you? Even within your marketing, you don't have to be actively there, kind of, reminding people and being persistent. If you had email campaigns, if you had, I don't know, anything that you've got going on that you could send of value, that's something else. Maybe, sending something of value and being like, I just saw this and I thought of you. Oh, by the way, do you want to get that catch-up call done? And kind of spinning it
yeah,
a little bit. So yeah, that's a good one.
That's absolutely right, Jess. And what I say to people is instead of just bombarding them with emails, if you're adding value to the conversation,
mm,
it's super important, because ultimately people want to buy. They just don't want to be sold to. So if you can say something, oh, Jess, I read this, or I saw this article and I thought of you. What do you think? And then you're opening up that communication, aren't you? Opening that dialogue, and you've not said, I want to sell to you, or, let's buy from me. You've added value. You're doing something different that nobody else is doing. So it's just as important to offer advice, as rather than just trying to sell to them all the time.
yeah, absolutely. We have to remember the buyer's journey and the different stages of that, and the level of and type different types of things that people need to be educated on in that buyer's journey. So, right.
Absolutely. Okay, my final point, and this is a good one. Who likes silence?
No, I just I have to be I have to be the one to fill it. I'm sorry, silence. Silence is my enemy.
Right. Silence is golden. Okay, and the first person to talk usually loses. Okay, you've got to be comfortable being quiet, because what salespeople sometimes do is they'll ask a question, and then if the person on the end of the phone or in front of them doesn't reply right away, they then start to speak again, and that person might be thinking of a good answer, and you just interrupted them. So it's you should always pause from like 3 to 5 seconds after you've asked a question. Okay, um, and give that person a chance to respond. So you've got to get comfortable with silence. Okay.
And this, as if by magic, I had just typed that.
Yeah. Yeah. Just
I have to be really kind of even when I'm having these workshops or kind of having conversations, we have to tell myself, give them time to think, give them time to think, breathe, right, okay, and then ask another question, because I am quite, my communication style is very expressive, if you've not noticed already. So I'm up, I'm down, I can be fast, I can be slow, I'm using my hands, so I'm naturally like that, so I have to kind of consciously and it's practice, isn't it? It just takes practice. And then once we do it so often, like you said, Stephen, with it's natural to you now. It's just getting into the pattern and the routine of doing it. So yeah, if you're listening and thinking, "Oh, how am I going to do this?" then you're not alone.
Absolutely. So somebody once told me, we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should use them in that order.
Absolutely.
Because it's
Well,
just
Roseanne, beg your pardon.
No, go ahead.
Rosanna commented, most salespeople are too uncomfortable with silence. This is a question you had earlier that I referred to. When they ask a question and the prospect gets quiet, most reps immediately try and fill that silence by asking a follow-up question or clarifying the ask. What are your thoughts on this? So Stephen just answered your question. So yeah, it's I think it comes back to that thing about, the mindset and the fear, and whereas if you allow the silence, it's not even about, I think, don't even think about it in terms of winning or losing, but just allow that person processing time. The more time that they're thinking, then the better answer they're going to come up with. So if you interrupt them, as you said, Stephen, then you've cut their thinking time off.
Yep.
So they may well lose their train of thought. You may well lose a sale because they feel interrupted, but also they're thinking, like, maybe what you asked really is something they haven't thought about, or maybe they have thought about it and they're trying to figure out how to word their answer. There could be all sorts of reasons why that silence needs to be there, isn't there?
Absolutely. You should allow the person time to reply and be silent, and that way you're setting the precedent that it's okay to be silent and it's not a bad thing. I mean, even at home, like, I'm okay with comfortable silences. You've got to be comfortable, and that's what it's all about. And it's being confident and knowing that you've done your bit. Allow the person time to respond. Let them get their point back across that will enable you to um, channel the conversation a certain way. As much as we want to lead the conversation, we also want to be led by the prospect or the client, or because ultimately it's all about them. It's not about us, it's about them. So it's got to be steered in a certain way. But by taking too much control and filling in the void, it can have a negative effect on the outcome of the conversation. So be comfortable with your own silence.
Definitely. So, Jess, what's been which of these points are you going to take away and implement then? What's been most significant for you?
There's there's been a lot, and there's a lot of information there as well. But I'm definitely going to read that book, Never Split the Difference. But I think when you were talking about matching and mirroring communication styles, I think that what's really helped me kind of adapt to this, because like I say, it doesn't come natural, is understanding my own communication style as well as the client and consumer's communication style. Because as soon as we understand what different communication styles are, we can see the little triggers, we can spot the, the kind of how they're processing, how they're thinking, and how you can adapt to that as well. And also what I was going to say as well is what helps me as well. Be conscious about this in your personal life, because I do a lot of practice on my communication style on Dan at home. So we're completely opposite communication styles. I know Una, you and Steve are as well, aren't you? You're complete opposites. I'm quite fast paced. I'll say exactly what I'm thinking, and obviously when I'm at home, I'm in my natural surroundings, so I don't think about it too much. It's just subconscious. But Dan's the complete opposite. He has to think more, process. He has to take things in, and where you can tell when he's thinking, because he just looks like this, and I'm like, oh my God, he's just like, so understanding,
He's not
communication
angry, he's just thinking.
he's just thinking. But understanding that in your personal life will then help within your sales call. So don't think of these tips as, okay, I've got my sales hat on and I need to talk like this. Just try and adapt it in your everyday, just to help with that practice.
And actually, just going back to your final point as well about getting comfortable with silence. When you're comfortable with silence, you're really putting the other person at ease. Whereas if you're kind of on edge and kind of, oh, I've got to get this sale, or oh, I want to get this point across, or those kinds of things, that's going to make the other person uncomfortable. Like we subconsciously pick up on each other's energy, on the vibe. I mean, just think about it. Have you ever gone into a room and there was two people there and you could cut the tension with a knife? I mean, think about that phrase, cut the tension with a knife. It's tangible. You can feel it. So the interesting thing is you can feel it over the phone. You can feel it over Zoom or Teams. It's still, whatever the vibe is that you're giving off, the other person will feel it. So the more that you can be calm, centered, comfortable, and kind of not attached to the outcomes, the better outcomes you're actually going to get.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Mm.
So those are my top 6 communication techniques.
Fabulous. Well, thank you very much, Stephen. I think there's some great value there for people. All of those are in the comments below if you want to go back to them. I'm going to add that, but I've heard of that book a few times before from you and other people, so I'm going to add that to my reading list as well. Yeah, we will talk about that again in the future.
Excellent.
So fabulous. All right. Well, next week, and I actually brought it up for once. Next week, we're going to be talking about how to improve your productivity. So if you want to if you want to have get more done in the same hours, make sure you show up same time next week. We will be back then. Have a fantastic week in the meantime. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.